Hello, my name is Benjamin Lee, and I just want to welcome everyone. It is now 1 p.m., so we'll begin our presentation shortly. Today, on October 19th, we'll have our presentation on A Tale of Three City Pairs, Regional Economic Growth and Rail Transit Investment, given by Bill Lee. For help during today's webcast, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box found in the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen, or call 1-800-263-6317. For content questions, please feel free to type those in the questions box, and we'll be able to answer those at the end of the presentation. Here is a list of the sponsoring chapters, divisions, and universities. I'd like to thank all of the participating chapters, divisions, and universities for making these webcasts possible. These are the list of the upcoming events. To register for these upcoming webcasts, please visit utahapa.org/webcast and register for your webcast of choice. We are now offering distance education webcasts to help you get your ethics or law credits before the end of the year. These webcasts are available to view at utahapa.org webcast archive. To log your distance education CM credits, go to planning.org/CM, select activities by provider, select APA Ohio chapter, then select distance education and select your webcast of choice. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and we also upload the recorded videos on YouTube. To log your same credits for attending today's webcast, please go to planning.org/CM, select today's date, and then select today's webcast. This webcast is available for 1.5 CM credit. We are recording today's webcast, and it will be available along with a 6-slide per page PDF of the presentation at utahapa.org webcast archive. At this time, I would like to introduce Andy, who will introduce our speaker, Bill, for today.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Andy Struckoff. I'm with the Economic Development Division of the American Planning Association, and we help organize these webinars every year, and we really like see all your participation, so thank you for joining us today. Our speaker today, his name is Bill Lee. He's been in land planning, economics, and economic development consulting since 1970, and is formerly the managing principal of Economics Research Associates San Francisco office prior to being bought by AECOM, where he was employed until recently. He's now the principal of Bill Lee Land Econ Consultants. He has led a variety of assignments in evaluating the economic impacts and benefits of rail projects, and he has done so internationally. He has worked on such assignments in California, Australia, Taiwan, South Korea, and New Zealand. And he's here today to share with us some of his knowledge and experience. So I'll hand it over to him, and before I do so, you see right now a link to the Planning Division's websites and our Economic Development Division blog. I encourage you to check those out as you can, or follow us on Twitter. And so, Bill, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Good afternoon and good morning to those of you on the West Coast. This is me, Bill Lee, a longtime consultant in the confluence area between land planning, economics, and transportation, particularly urban rail transportation. Now, I'm going to take you through an assignment I did in 2010 as part of AECOM, where I was Executive VP. And in doing that assignment and developing the urban regeneration benefits, we had to compare and contrast 3 sets of city pairs. And that's part of the show, and you also get a sense of the Auckland project to sort of round out how these pairs were used in that context. The assignment was for the city of Auckland, which is the capital of New Zealand. Auckland Auckland's current population, the metro area, is probably about 1.4 million. It's a country of only 4.2 million. The city of Auckland is on the water. In many ways, is like the city I work in, San Francisco. It has a ferry building down here. It has a main central spine called Queen Street, I believe, and that's like our Market Street. However, unlike our Market Street, which has trolleys on the surface, light rail 1 level below, and heavy rail or BART 2 levels below, Auckland doesn't have much transit on this central spine other than buses. Our assignment was preparing a business case for what till today is the most expensive infrastructure project in the history of New Zealand. Our client was a twofold client. It was Auckland Transport, which is equivalent to our City Department of Transportation, and Kiwi Rail, which is the National Rail Operating Agency. We had a big team for this major assignment. There were engineering and other aspects to it, which I'm not going to get into. But the firm I worked for at the time, AECOM, was the lead consultant out of Australia and New Zealand. Parsons Bakerhoff was a team member, and a New Zealand urban design firm, a very good urban design firm called Becca, was also on the team. They got into the business case, and the traditional way of looking at transportation benefits that the UK countries do weren't high enough. They weren't getting the project over the threshold needed to get central government funding. So they called me up and did a video interview with me and wanted me to bring a North American perspective, which is more of a land use perspective, into the analysis. To give you a sense of downtown Auckland, this is downtown Auckland, the Auckland CBD. The red is the freeway network. In some ways, it forms a barrier that contains the downtown. All of this is fairly walkable, except it's fairly steep uphill this way. This is the existing rail line. It took advantage of some previous rail infrastructure. And to get into downtown, you basically come around the outside and you go to the ferry building vicinity at a station called Britomart. So the CBD is constrained by the freeway. To get in here. And if you try to widen the surface transport infrastructure to get more cars in, you're chewing up land and taking up part of the downtown. This is the catchment area, sort of a half mile or 700 to 800 meter catchment area for the rail stations. As you can see, much of the central business district is not well served. And you can see the growth, you can see deterioration in the inner core here, the new office going along the waterfront near Britomart. You see new development near the rail transit out here, a future station out here, but clearly beginning to see decay and concerns by the city over the core of the downtown. This is the project we were to evaluate. It's like a 3-kilometer rail tunnel, has 3 stations that link the system up. This is the central downtown station called Aotea. This is the upper downtown station. This is on high ground, K Road, because nobody can pronounce the name of the road. And this is Newton. They're all on the ground. And by making this a circle, you don't force trains to come in and back out, so you make the whole system, the whole rail network, much more efficient. This is a compressed, horizontal scale compressed cross-section of the rail tunnel. as you can see, this is the rail line here, the green line. This is the ground plane. This is the Bryn Mawr station. This is the Aotea station, the central downtown station. There's quite a distance here. This is the K Road station, and it's like a 30-meter reach from the rail to the surface. And this is the Newton station. Because it's so deep underground, it's an expensive project, emergency evacuation, ventilation, fire prevention, etc. Required a lot of excavation. The city and the region had some overarching objectives to the project. It wasn't just about transportation. It was about supporting the growth and development of the CBD of Auckland, which is by far their largest city. Optimize patronage and accessibility to and from the CBD and within the CBD itself. And then optimize efficiency and the potential of the rail investment they already made in the network, and to make this an integrated part of the national rail network. So in order to develop some additional sort of benefits, we needed a series of building blocks. First, our audience wasn't just the city of Auckland. It was the central government's Ministry of Transportation and their finance people, because the central government's going to be asked to pay for all or a good part of the project. Traditionally in New Zealand, projects of this magnitude, the central government has paid for it. So these people, engineers and financial analysts, they will not accept opinions. They want quantitative proof to the extent can provide it. So my quantitative background was helpful in this analysis. So the way we developed the building blocks are, one, we just did a brief summary of the literature covering this topic mostly in North America. These are done by universities, a lot of it, Dr. Robert Severo of Berkeley, others. We selected the studies that had hedonic analysis, regression analysis, basically, comparing similar property transactions with the only variable being distance to the transit station. And over time, there was this statistical case for higher rents and higher property values as you, approach the station. Then we wanted to develop some case studies, and this is one of the central points of this presentation, comparing cities and metropolitan areas of similar size and scale or prestige, comparing pairs where one did CBD serving rail and one did not, to see what the implications were. And then we want to get into the local scene of why a strong CBD was important for Auckland and for New Zealand. So the summary of the literature survey, at least the North American literature survey, basically indicated, based on light rail and commuter rail, and some of this literature is a little bit dated now, that for residential property within a half-mile, you get, depending on the system and the location, you get about a 10 to 25% premium in value. The premium falls away after a half-mile from the station. For suburban office, it's actually more. It's 25 to 60% premium. For CBD office, the premium could be 100% or more. And for urban retail, there was maybe a 30 to 50% premium on rents and values. So that's the first step, sort of just to set the stage for the subsequent analysis. And then we try to screen for and develop city pairs. And this was actually fairly difficult because there are not that many like cities where one has built rail and one has not. And we wanted to be statistically rigorous, so we didn't want to forecast in the future. We wanted to go back in history to see what was actually built in terms of urban development. So we wanted to select city pairs that, one, were of similar international profile or reputation. We wanted metropolitan areas of comparable population and employment, about similar size economies and similar size economic growth. We wanted CBDs of similar size and geographic orientation. And then we had to have cities where one built rail, one did not. And we wanted to use a defined 20-year time frame with the rail project completed during the early parts of that 20-year time frame to actually track what did happen. Some of the impact, as most of you would know, is anticipatory. If the project is set, it's funded, you see the construction starting, developers are starting to make investment decisions in anticipation of completion of the rail project. So some of the impact leads the project completion by 3, 4, 5 years, and some of the impact comes after, and we think most of the impact happens within the first 1 or 2 decades after. So after struggling with this for about 2 weeks, we selected 3 city pairs. We selected San Francisco and contrasted it to Los Angeles. I know Los Angeles now is very active in rail construction and has a lot of rail, but the time period we wanted to look at was 1970 to 1990. The first segment of BART was completed in 1972, and I think the system was all hooked up by 74. The second pair we selected was Portland, which is very famous for rail and light rail, supported downtown. And we decided to contrast Portland with Memphis, Tennessee, because the Memphis region and the Portland region matched up extremely well in terms of size of population, size of employment, and even the profile of employment. And since the first Portland line was finished in the mid-'80s, we took 1980 to 2000. And these are slightly biased to systems I either wrote papers on or worked on, as a student or early in my career, so I knew their histories. And then San Diego, California, the blue line, the Tijuana Trolley, opened in '81. We compared that to St. Petersburg, Florida, both coastal waterfront cities, and the regional economies of very similar size. Again, a 20-year period. So we wanted to compare what we could actually measure. And so we defined a CBD for San Francisco of 5 square kilometers approximately, and for downtown Los Angeles of nearly comparable size. It's bounded by the freeways, and can't remember which street that is on the east, maybe Los Angeles Street. So you can see they're about the same size and shape. Then, over this period for the San Francisco Bay Area, taking the 6-county region, 114 million square feet of office space was built. This is not an estimate. CoStar, in their office statistics, tracks the construction dates of individual office buildings. So we went back and added those up. And during those 20-year period, that 70 to 90 period, in the region, 114 million square feet of office construction. This is not net addition, but this is new construction. And we think, influenced by BART, 30% was built in the San Francisco CBD, in that area you saw in the previous slide. In Los Angeles, we took Los Angeles and Orange counties. And the Southern California economy is actually quite a bit bigger than the San Francisco Bay Area, although we believe, being biased up here, that in terms of international reputation and profile, the two regions are fairly comparable. Downtown LA only got 8% of the office construction, about 25 million out of the 300 million square feet. So in terms of actual office construction measured on a building-by-building, year-by-year basis for a 20-year period, even though the LA region did a lot more construction, San Francisco had 10 million square feet more office construction than downtown LA during that period. LA's rail investment came pretty much after 1990. So we think the access that was provided by BART, particularly across the Bay, was instrumental in this difference. So one case, one pair, you know, you can't generalize from that. So then we moved on to Portland and Memphis. Portland is a riverfront city. It's downtown, fronts on the Willamette River. And in the 1970s, downtown Portland was pretty seedy. You wouldn't want to walk around much of it at night. Memphis is also a riverfront city. It's on the Mississippi River. And Portland took its Mount Hood freeway money and converted over to a rail. Didn't have rail, wasn't even thinking about rail, built a loop freeway system from the downtown to the east, a big loop which tended to disperse development. So over the 20-year period from 1980 to 2000, Portland region added 29 million square feet of office in terms of new construction. The Memphis region added 30 million. So in terms of economic growth and office development, I got 20% market share. Memphis downtown got 5%. So then the office development in Memphis, you know, distributed along the Ring Road and went out the Poplar corridor, where Portland, most of it remained in the CBD. Most of the high-profile office stayed in the CBD. And there was a 7-to-1 ratio. So, this looks pretty good. Let's do another one. So then, San Diego is a waterfront city, fronts on San Diego Bay, Pacific Ocean. And we decided to compare it to St. Petersburg, Florida, another waterfront city fronting on the Atlantic. Again, the CBDs are about the same size. And as you can see, both regions over that 20-year period had 55 million square feet of office construction, you know, tracked from individual buildings by year. And the San Diego CBD got 11% market share. St. Petersburg only got 3%. San Diego built rail. St. Petersburg did not. Again, 6.1 million square feet of office construction in San Diego, 1.7 million in St. Petersburg. So we thought that was fairly convincing. It implied that CBDs that benefited from rail investment got about 22% of the regional office construction when you average the three, and versus 5% for the CBDs that did not. So about a fourfold difference. Now, we didn't think that fourfold difference was completely applicable to Auckland because Auckland already had a Brevard station. So we thought maybe a twofold increase in office construction over a 20-year period would be a reasonable expectation. Now, why is additional office construction focused on the CBD important for Auckland and important for New Zealand and important for cities like San Francisco? We were very fortunate in that a nonprofit research institute called MOTU had done a survey a couple of years before comparing value added per worker in New Zealand for different geographic regions. Value added per worker is the value of firm output, total sales, gross sales basically. You know, subtracting out less the value of intermediate inputs, excluding employee compensation, depreciation, and taxes. So what does each worker add in terms of the value of your output? And this study found that within the Auckland CBD, that number was $107,000 per worker. For Auckland City as a whole, including the CBD, was about $77,000. And as you got more and more suburban, more and more rural, the number dropped. Clearly, there is a economic premium for having a more concentrated CBD. And that premium comes from the firm's ability, if you're located in the CBD, to select labor from the largest possible labor pool. If you're an employer and you locate where you have the best access to the largest possible labor pool during the peak commute period, you can be most selective in who you pay and how you use your salary dollars. When I ran the San Francisco office of ERA, I put our office right on top of the Embarcadero station, and I thought that was a tremendous advantage. I could pick on the best and the brightest in our regional labor market. So those are the firms that become most successful. They pay the highest rents, and there's probably a agglomeration effect. You get more people doing face-to-face business, and their efficiencies that way. You can walk across the street. Where I was, I could walk across the street to SOM, 2 blocks to Field Paley. Most of the planners and urban designers I met with were within a 10-minute walk. I didn't have to get in a car, drive, park, take a half hour. So there's some advantages to that. So that was a very fortunate find for our study team. So based on the case studies, we then did a market study of Auckland CBD. This is a traditional market study where, we did forecasts of employment and development with and without the rail link, or now it's called the City Link project. We thought, the gray is their sort of baseline forecast, and the blue is the new forecast. So out 10 years after completion, we thought there was a 20,000 premium in downtown employment, and this is sustained over time. Not all of these people are coming in by rail. There are going to be more people living downtown. If you have more employees downtown, you have less land devoted for parking and streets. So based on the experience of the case study cities and the employment forecast, we looked at different cities and the profile of employment in their CBDs. Typically in a city, 55–60% of the employment in the CBD is office employment. So we worked that number back and forth. We know that office is the land use that benefits greatest from improved transit service due to its need for peak hour labor force access. We believed a new AOTS station with height increases and urban design improvements in the CBD will make that a major employment hub and probably allow the development of some of the tallest buildings in Auckland. With additional office employment growth, you're going to get more retail, entertainment, dining, and cultural venues. They have a 30-story height limit around the AOTS station. We suggest that that should be lifted. And if they ever want to use tax increment financing, that additional height and value will be very helpful. This is our forecast of office space development. This is the net change in office space in square meters. So it's 1.6 million, 1.7 million square meters, or about 17 million square feet over 20 years after rail completion without the rail project, and about 20 million with the rail project. Since this is forecast into the future, this is more opinion based on case studies and a large body of practice. You know, you can't really prove it. Housing, they've been working on a housing redevelopment, getting more housing downtown. They got so many student housing that they're beginning to get concerned, but there is a waterfront area, a docks area that was going to be redeveloped, so the units would have waterfront views and potentially a very nice neighborhood. We think with more office and more employment downtown, there would be more housing demand in the CBD as well. About 8,000 more is our estimate. Bringing the rail in underground means you get a lot more people in here without needing more road capacity and more parking structure capacity to chew up land and airspace. As you have more employees downtown, more residents downtown, you're going to have more restaurants, more retail, more entertainment venues. When you do auto-oriented shopping centers where you have one or two large parking structures, they tend to go reasonably well with vertical stacked malls because all of your parking, all of your customers are, you know, in one area, and you could feed them from the parking structure into a vertical mall. But when you have rail stations and multiple stations where the people are coming up from underground stations and walking along the street, that tends to be good for street retailing. And the retail trend internationally is tending away from vertical malls into more vibrant street retailing. So rails kind of reinforce that as well. One of our conclusions that kind of surprised them was that with more office downtown, more housing downtown, more retail downtown, more cultural venues downtown, you're going to get more hotel development downtown too. One is there are more business reasons to come downtown. Two is that Auckland now is not a very exciting city. The average length of stay for people, tourists coming to New Zealand, is 1.5 days in Auckland, and the rest of the time in the rest, you know, in the balance of the country. New Zealand's a beautiful country. We had a 2-week vacation in New Zealand shortly after I did this project, and we spent one night in Auckland. We felt with a more vibrant pedestrian downtown with better restaurants and cultural venues, you know, you get people to stay an extra day in Auckland. You know, if half the people stayed an extra day, it's a huge increase in hotel demand. So we thought that was very significant. So in summarizing the benefits, you know, largely from our perspective, this is North American perspective, the greater CBD density shifts a number of suburban to CBD vehicle trips. These could be auto trips or bus trips to pedestrian trips within the CBD. By changing from vehicle trips to pedestrian trips, you have lower average trip costs and you have time savings. We think there's substantial urban form benefits. You don't need as much street capacity. Transportation planners that are auto-oriented tend to always widen streets, one-lane streets, multiple lanes to facilitate flow. If you bring them in underground by rail, and you don't need as much of that. Your signal phasing can be more friendly to pedestrians. Ever try to cross Westwood across Wilshire Boulevard into Westwood Village from the south side? Those signal cycles take about 10 minutes. Another big part of it, if you have an auto-served CBD, you need a lot of land and a lot of air rights area for parking structures. And you have a lot of driveways that intrude on the pedestrian environment. So the airspace you're using for parking, you're not using for buildings that house people, whether it be employees or residents or hotels, and that reduces the number of pedestrians you put on the street. And you also don't have as much area for bus loading, and as Portland well knows, their bus malls where the people wait for the bus historically block the retail entrances to the stores. The stores all open away from the bus mall. They put their entrances on the side streets or on the back side from the bus mall. And that was a problem when we were looking at that. There are some long-term economic development effects as well. You create a more vibrant pedestrian district. You provide more opportunity for chance social encounters, and it's more attractive for retention and attraction of talented young workers. You compare Auckland to Sydney. When I was in the AECOM Sydney office, they wanted to transfer some of the younger people to Auckland, to New Zealand. Even though the cost of living in New Zealand is quite a bit lower than Sydney and Auckland, the young people didn't want to go. You know, it was kind of like being sent to Siberia. For the same pay and lower living costs, they didn't want to go because Sydney is so vibrant, and they thought Auckland was kind of slow and dead. So when we took the urban regeneration benefits into consideration and put it into the cost-benefit analysis, we got quite a bit more benefit than cost for the system. What we did is we took the employment premium, that 20,000 additional employees in the CBD, and then multiplied that by the labor productivity or value added per worker premium of about 30,000 per worker, and say that's part of your benefit. You should take that into consideration. Now, this is a pretty good sell to you guys, like preaching to the choir. It was a good sell to the City of Auckland, but the central government of New Zealand and the Ministry of Transport didn't believe it. They said, Bill, you're biased. The way we do it, it's like this. We don't believe in land use change. You just keep the land use constant and do the transportation analysis, and that's how we do our benefits. So this went back and forth for the better part of a year. The Commonwealth countries, UK, Australia, Britain, have been using what they call an economic evaluation manual for transportation projects. And they they have a basis for doing this. They like doing it that way. They've done it for 10 years. That's the only way it works. And this approach, they treat this approach in combination with their fairly weak transport modeling capability basically ignores the land use changes. You know, they treat the CBD as a single zone. So all those trips, that suburban to CBD auto trips that became pedestrian trips because you have more people downtown, more housing, more employment downtown, you know, that's sort of lost. You know, the time savings, the cost savings of those trips don't count. And the better urban design benefits of fewer parking structures, narrower streets, more pedestrian-friendly environments, and long-term appeal of a vibrant CBD, you can't prove that, Bill. We can't count that. So, and then we dug into their traffic modeling. You know, most traffic models don't really fully account for that pedestrian or bike trip to the transit station, and then clearly was not paying much attention to the within CBD pedestrian trip. And we found as the employment and housing grew in the CBD, it had no way of adding congestion to the street system for vehicles and buses. So it soon free-flowing by autos. And then it had no way of accounting for higher cost of parking as you got more and more people into the CBD. And they clearly did not have the ability to interact land use, zone change in land use with changes in transportation system improvements. When I started the assignment, the client told me, Bill, don't worry about land use, just keep it constant. You know, so that was sort of the mindset we were faced with, and to try to change policy. This got into a bit of a political stalemate. At the same time, the city of Auckland was being restructured. It took 6 of the smaller cities in the region, including Auckland, and 2 of the regional agencies, and formed Super City Auckland. I guess Parliament did that. It didn't require votes by all the cities like it would here. So all of a sudden you had a super city that was, you know, maybe 40% of the national economy and about 35% of the political representation in Parliament. So it became a lot more powerful. And the new mayor, Len Brown, was a strong proponent of rail. He just got elected in the super city. The city council was all for it. The local press was all for it. But the central government, which had the responsibility to fund most of it, didn't want anything to do with the project. You had a minister of transport that says he wanted to fund 10 scenic highways because that was better for the national economy. So they hired a consulting firm out of the UK called SDG. They hired the guy from the UK that originally wrote the economic evaluation manual. That, you know, he went 2 rounds to discredit our work, basically saying, you can't count this, you can't prove that, we can't count this, this is not how we did it in the last 10 years, so you can't do it this way. You can't count land use changes as benefit to rail investment. So over a period of time, the local New Zealand offices of AECOM felt their reputation was being battered. They said, Bill, you can go back to San Francisco, but we have to live here and we have to do business here. We're taking a beating here. Let's hire a U.S. professor and have him do a peer review of our work and the SDG work and see what he says. So I went out and we got Dr. Robert Severo, Berkeley professor in transportation and urban planning. And actually, to my surprise, he was surprisingly supportive of our work. Here's some quotes from him. He On balance, I found the use of international case experience, secondary data sources, and modeling assumptions used by the APB&B team to inform estimates of economic benefits to be well-reasoned, unbiased, and justifiable. I would be hard-pressed to improve upon the case selection or methods employed by APB&B. That was our team, to evaluate likely impacts of a city rail link. While the SDG provides at times useful suggestions on how to possibly improve on the forecast, I found some critiques to be of dubious value and perhaps even a bit polemical. I commend APB&B for the rigor and care used in building a business case for CityLink. While another round of revisions will no doubt refine the estimates, on balance, my sense is that they pretty much got it right in assessing the likely impacts of CityLink on urban regeneration and CBD labor productivity. So that took a lot of pressure off the local people, and over time, we think the project will go ahead. Here's some quick lessons for city planners. Environment very well. They're developed for highways and cars and trucks. We need another generation of model development to get at, true transit potential. And be skeptical of quantitative model output. I mean, when I got into the weeds models, it was really alarming how weak they were. But there is no question in my mind from 4 decades of practice that transportation systems shape urban form over decades. Hub and spoke design rail systems clearly reinforce the central business district. You could argue, but you can never prove, that a stronger central business district gives you a stronger regional economy. But I do believe it gives you a better competitive position internationally. Your CBD is more vibrant, is more appealing to workers of talent. I think San Francisco is a good example of that. Sydney as well. Transportation planners like to spread the traffic out so you don't have congestion. So they like grid pattern streets and freeways. And that spreads the development evenly over the landscape, and you don't have that single point or multiple nodes of focus that sort of give your urban area the character, the vitality to be internationally noteworthy city. I have a little YouTube video that just came out a month ago that by the mayor of Auckland, that brings this analysis up to date, the political implications of this analysis up to date. And if I can get the technology right, I'll play it for you. It's about 4 minutes, I think. I'm going to try it again. If it doesn't work, if the sound doesn't work, I'll give up.
Double the capacity of the whole rail network. Steam growing flat out. Another 20, 25 years, we expect an extra million people to be in Auckland. So it's time to invest in infrastructure. Now, we've got buses operating, and that's fabulous, but for example, the inner city area, we are congestion point for the buses too. You've got a bus every 30 to 40 seconds. So with rail, it's great. You can move 3 times the number of people on rail as you do on busways, and 10 times the number of people on rail as you do on motorway lanes. We've done double tracking of our rail system, lots of station upgrades, and we've also got electric trains coming on, but we need their inner city rail links to ensure that we expand the full rail network for all of our people.
What does the city rail link mean for Auckland transport users?
Well, it's critical because if you're coming from the west, it'll halve the time that it'll take for you to get into the city. If you're coming from the south east, it'll take about 30 or 40% of the time of getting into the city and getting around the network. Also, make sure the Britomart station is a full through station. As it presently stands, you basically have a cul-de-sac, you come in, you go out, you shut in, you shut down a new market. The system is strange. We get 2 to 3 times the number of people. Presently, 11 million rail users, up to 30 million people in total on the rail network. The consequence of struggling faster
I don't know how well you guys could hear the audio portion, but I wanted to just see some images of Auckland. And in essence, what has happened is that the city of Auckland has decided to reserve the right-of-way and has funded property acquisition on the rail line to preempt developers from, forcing them to buy property later with plans for huge developments on them. And they are negotiating with the central government as to who pays for what share. They asked us initially to take a cut at who should pay for what, and we looked at the benefits. We felt there were 3 levels of benefits. There were national benefits due to improved global competitiveness of New Zealand, particularly of Auckland, some acceleration of tax-based expansion. There are clearly regional benefits, acceleration of regional economic growth, travel time benefits across the rail network, not just the link part, but the whole system, time savings for non-rail users, and quality of life improvements for the region. And there are local benefits, which I didn't get into a lot in this presentation, but there are property value increases and for both raw land that can be developed and for existing properties that can charge higher rents because of proximity to transit, or development pro formas where you don't have to build as much parking, you get more value out of it. So we suggested a 40-60 Auckland central government split, and that's what they're fighting about now, but I'm happy to see the project is moving forward, at least from Auckland's perspective. I think my hour is up, and we'll go to questions. So, Andy, I don't know how to proceed from here. Hello?
Andy?
Here I am. Sorry about that. Forgot I have my mute button on. Anyway, yeah, hi, here's Andy, and some questions people have submitted during the course of the presentation that I'll pose to you, Bill, if you're ready.
I am ready.
Okay. Let's see. Start with a question from Barbara Gilliland, who asks, did you look at the land use policies of the city pairs, and did the cities with rail do anything to encourage growth along those lines?
I actually did, because I worked in some of those cities. Clearly in San Francisco, when Barb was coming in, there was a deliberate shift to focus the development on that BART corridor. The previous, go back to 1970, before the Loma Prieta earthquake, there were freeway ramps coming into Clay and Washington. If you came in from the East Bay, you looped around the Embarcadero and you got off at Clay and Washington, which is several blocks north of Market Street. The 100% location of San Francisco for office space was at Montgomery and California. When all that transit capacity was added to Market Street, there was a deliberate policy shift to develop south of Market with office, housing, retail, ballpark, and all that. So the rail corridor had a two-sided downtown to serve. I think that policy has largely been very successful. In Portland, yes, they were very conscious of land use changes at the stations, but the east side was sort of the weaker, lower income, blue-collar side of Portland, and a lot of those stations didn't get developed right away. But I think if you look at the near east side, near Lloyd Center, in that vicinity, there was a lot of government investment, public infrastructure investment in parks, urban design improvements in convention centers and things like that. So the Near East Side is now much better than in the 80s. Gresham has had good revitalization, and I attribute, a lot of Portland downtown's vibrancy to not just that rail line, but the subsequent rail lines they built. City of Portland capped the number of parking spaces that you could have downtown at something like 32,000. You know, if you were building new development, you had to fight to get a share of that parking. And if you didn't build any parking, that was great with them. And then you can look at the land use policies of Memphis. They try to get downtown going, and they try very hard, but because of that ring road and the movement of office to the east, they struggled for several decades. They put in a little rail line, a trolley line, that has stimulated some development along the line, and their downtown is starting to come around a little bit. San Diego, San Diego tried very hard to redevelop its downtown. They finally got Han to put it in a shopping center, I think in the late 70s or early 80s. But again, I think I'm primarily an economist and not as focused on specific land use policies. Does that answer the question? Andy?
I certainly hope so. No, I think so. I think it does. So you have another question here from someone from Gregory Perkins. In your San Francisco-Los Angeles comparison, you said that San Francisco had about 34 million square feet downtown of about 200 million square feet metro-wide. Does that include all of Oakland and San Jose too? And if it does, should the downtown numbers also include some in Oakland and maybe a little in San Jose? If so, would that downtown number of 34 million in percent of about 20% be even greater?
The San Francisco region number was, if I remember correctly, was 100. If you go back to that period of 70 to 90, if you added in downtown Oakland and added in San Jose, down San Jose, it was still Palo Alto. Yeah, so maybe if you put in Oakland and San Jose, it wouldn't have been 35 million, it might have been 37 million.
Okay. Okay. So another question. Someone asking if you took into account other factors that influence CBD growth, such as topography or natural amenities or any other growth factors.
Well, we tried to take sort of geographic and climate characteristics into consideration in comparing them. Mm-hmm. But actually getting these pairs was probably the hardest thing to do. Now San Diego was a bayfront city, sunny. Petersburg, Florida is a similar city. Portland, CBD is on the river. Memphis is on the river. LA, San Francisco, sort of comparable in terms of international reputation and prestige. So we try to take as many factors into consideration as we could, but if you got too fine-grained, you'd never be able to come up with these pairs.
Okay, thank you. And here's a question from someone. I know that they found it very interesting that you got pushback on making private investments to the transit projects. And I see, did they attribute the investments to?
We got pushback from private investment to the transit projects. The pushback we got was from the Ministry of Transport in New Zealand, who had a strong highway bias. I also think they felt they could get more money out of Auckland. They could get the city of Auckland to pay for more of it. Probably their negotiating strategy. I don't think we got pushback from the private sector. The private sector was generally supportive, and the landowners around the future stations were definitely supportive. Okay. The pushback, there was one critical property owned by Westfield, where if you expanded the Britomar station and the trains through, you would have to run under that one block owned by Westfield, which is a big shopping center developer, property owner out of Australia. And what the city of Auckland was concerned about is that Westfield would submit plans for a huge building with a big underground garage right in the path of that rail expansion. When they try to acquire that property, would ask for an exorbitant amount of money because it jeopardized that project. So the city of Auckland wanted to reserve the right-of-way and start acquiring property before Westfield did that. I think maybe that was the intent of the question.
Okay. Okay, thanks. There's another question from another attendee about the fact that your studies focus on underground rail and the difference between the impacts of underground rail, the impact of underground rail and the impact of above ground rail. Would there be a drastic change in statistics between underground versus at-grade rail, reflecting higher rents within entertainment and cultural venues in the same manner?
I think in larger cities, the best impact is from underground rail, even though it costs a lot more. Above ground rail in medium-sized cities probably work pretty well. Like in Portland, it works pretty well. A lot of it depends on how it's designed. In Portland, the tracks are not that intrusive, and you can cross the tracks as a pedestrian. You can park along certain streets that are served by the light rail. There are other cities that put up barriers so pedestrians cannot cross the rail line to patronize the local stores. So it's a function of urban design and how intrusive the above-ground rail might be. But for larger cities, I think the underground rail works best. For medium-sized cities that can't afford the cost, carefully designed above-ground light rail can work reasonably well. Portland's a great example, and I think Charlotte's probably another good example, although I haven't been there.
Yeah. And the person who asked the question about the pushback asked a follow-up question. If you could name the state of the agency, if you could name the agency again that gave you pushback.
It was the central government of New Zealand.
Okay.
You know, their Ministry of Transport, and then they had a guy that was their gatekeeper for the funding of infrastructure projects. I can't remember his title. You know, he was the gatekeeper. He wanted to minimize the amount of money they had to pay. So it's the central government versus the city. You know, Len Brown, the mayor of new super city Auckland, is probably the second most powerful person in New Zealand now, with the Prime Minister being the most powerful. I would suspect that Len Brown at some point will run for Prime Minister, and once he gets in there, he'll appoint new Minister of Transport, and the picture will change substantially. It was so obvious in some of the meetings they pulled me into where I started presenting. They said, oh, you're biased. You're picking the rail cities that had faster economic growth. You didn't think of this or that. You know, after about
I can imagine. Okay. Find another question. We got development impact fees or other transportation-related taxes, gas taxes, retail taxes to fund the project without aid from the federal government.
They're not at that point yet. both New Zealand and Australia have higher tax rates than we do, income tax rates. So their central government has a lot more money to spend than ours, or regional government as well. So, I mean, their consulting contracts, engineering contracts over there, 3 or 4 times what we get over here. So they're not worrying about fees. The tradition is the central government pay for everything for these big projects. So they're not there worrying about fees. They're paying higher taxes through their personal income tax, corporate income tax. Okay.
Okay. And then, let's see. Another question. How did you answer the question, how can you be sure that a percentage share of growth will be directly related to the rail system?
You can never be sure.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many variables going on at the same time. You could just, build a case from these case studies saying, look, here's 2 cities that are pretty similar. One did this, one did that. One got 4 times the office construction in the downtown than the other. And if you can present enough cases, eventually people think maybe you have a point. What this analysis doesn't show is that the additional development in the downtown is not necessarily net change for the region. Most of that is a redistribution of suburban development to the central city. But I do believe over time, better, more vibrant, more interesting, well-designed downtown gives you a better position to compete globally, and you do get some acceleration in economic growth, but nobody's been able to prove that. I can't prove that.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Then we have a follow-up question on an earlier question about your CBD market share data from 1970 through 1990. Wondering what the data would show if the range was 1990 through 2010.
I don't know. I'd have to go dig it out and try to assemble it and look at it. Los Angeles has started to build rail. It's got a lot more housing downtown, but it hasn't had a lot of office construction, even with the rail. And maybe that's yet to come.
Okay.
So I don't know. I'd have to look at the data and let it speak for itself.
Okay. Let's see, and last question before we get to our polls, before we close up, if you could, let's see, if you provided people with a link for the YouTube video, if you tell them how to get that?
Have it, but I can. Where should I put that? Send it to you, Andy?
What's that?
Where should I put that?
If you just put that up on your screen, I guess.
It's this one right here. Will you guys hear the video very well? The audio of the video?
I think that some people could, some people couldn't. I can hear it very well, but hopefully people get a chance to watch it on their own later on. Let's see.
It's this link right here.
Okay.
There's another one that deals with the same issue, but it covers 3 rail lines.
Okay.
You want me to forward you this email?
Sure, actually, that'd be great. Thank you. I guess now we'll launch. We just have a few polls to ask people about what their occupations are and what part of the country they're from.
I'm curious. What's your email, Andy?
It is. Well, here, I'll call you afterwards, and I'll give you my email address.
Is it or can you see it?
All right, now everybody should be able to see this occupation poll. If you just go ahead and take a quick second to answer those. Appreciate it. Give you a couple minutes. Okay, so we have a lot of folks from planning and public agency consultants here today. Some students and economic development consultants as well.
How can I see the poll results? I click this plus button.
Let's see. It should be part of your go-to webinar window right now. Let's see. There's a quick question to ask you all what part of the country you're from.
I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. Have been a resident here for 40 years.
For how long?
40 years.
40 years. Right on.
Something like that.
Right on.
Grew up in Los Angeles.
Right on. I like San Francisco. I go out there whenever I can take a vacation.
Great. We like you coming out here.
Okay. I'll give folks a few more seconds to answer this poll.
Okay. For those of you who couldn't hear the audio portion of the video, the essence was that the City Council of Auckland adopted resolution to reserve the right-of-way and to acquire the right-of-way properties needed. And they're negotiating with the central government as to who pays for what share.
Okay.
And since a third of the representation in Parliament represent the Auckland region, they're in pretty good position.
Pretty cool. All right, a lot of folks from the Eastern Time Zone today. Very cool. Okay, well, I think that does it for us today. Unless Billy got any last thoughts to add? Or?
Well, I want to thank everybody for giving me the privilege of presenting this little webinar. And Andy, if you could send me the results of your little poll, I'd love to see it.
Will do.
And I just sent you the email. The link is that second one there. And thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Bill. I appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Bye.